When I first got back into film photography, I was brought crashing back down to earth by a lab that didn't know how to process Portra 160 and made all my shots look like they were developed in Smurfland. After months of therapy and trying to convince myself otherwise, I've decided to jump back on the film bandwagon. But not in the way that you might expect. The Instax series of cameras are Fujifilm's answer to Polaroid. Instant film to give the loved ones in your life instant gratification. Not that I'd know anything about that. Here's Helen's sickeningly feminine Instax Mini 11, which shoots Instax Mini film. It's easy to load, just insert the cartridge into the back, lining up the two yellow points, and that's pretty much it. Even she could manage it. And I'm rocking an absolutely huge penis. I also use the Instax Wide 210 here, if you can just get your mind out of the gutter for a minute. There is a much newer model in the Instax Wide 300, but they're pretty much the same, and the 210 only costs around £30 compared to the 300's £110 price range. I couldn't justify the price difference personally, but do what you want, I'm not your dad. Helen's Instax Mini 11 arrived first, so we took a shot outside the house just to test it out. Remember, don't put in mouth. Which is a handy warning because I was going to eat it. Turns out there was something wrong with the camera as it was getting light leaks from somewhere. We fire off this entire roll and they all seem to have some kind of exposure light leak issue like this. So much so that many of the photos turned out bright white and completely overexposed. So we obviously got the camera exchanged, luckily just in time for our trip. I just thought it was an experience with this camera that was worth pointing out.
Hey there.
Well, let's take some shots before we get going of this glorious cottage and a beautiful view that we definitely own and didn't just rent for the week.
I wish.
And yeah, see how well it does in that high contrast scenario. Trying to account for the fact that the viewfinder isn't lined up with the lens itself, so... The phrase I was looking for here is parallax error. What you're looking at through the viewfinder isn't necessarily what your lens is seeing. Doesn't matter as much in wide shots, but the closer you get to a subject, the more apparent the parallax error will appear.
Here we go! Here we go!
I think the best practice is to
keep it in the dark.
Be quite dark.
Okay.
Or darker than just leaving it in broad daylight anyway. Turn it off.
Look at yours. Yours is bigger than mine.
Mine's a big manly one. Big and manly and girthy. That's how the ladies like them.
It is. It's a bit of a beast compared to mine.
I think it takes about 2 minutes. Something like that. 90 seconds.
There's a lot you can do in that time.
Especially with something as big and girthy as this. Could bludgeon someone to death.
What's going on?
Well,
oh, it's coming!
We're getting somewhere.
Getting somewhere. Oh.
Unlike with the Instax Mini, you can brighten and darken the exposure on the Wide 210. And apparently I should have done that here. It's exposed more for the highlights and left the foreground more dark and underexposed than I'd like. There's also that dreaded blue cast over the image that still haunts me to this day. I didn't actually test my camera before we left because preparation's for nerds. So I fired off the first few shots here just to get an idea of what to expect with the exposure and see if I had any better luck with a scene that needs less dynamic range. Yeah, it's not the shot of the century. None of these images are going to be. But it was a relief to see that the image was exposed perfectly. I have my back to the sun, so as long as I bear that in mind, the shot should turn out alright. I also had the gate just there to the far right of the frame because I was compensating for the viewfinder and the lens again. So it'll be interesting to see where it actually is in the composition here. Okay, it takes me about half an hour to get my thoughts out here. All I'm trying to say is that I put the garden gate to the rightmost side of the frame, and once the shot was developed, the gate had moved closer to the centre of the frame. I was about 10 feet away from the gate, and it's probably shifted around 3 to 4 feet in the image compared to where I could see it through the viewfinder. Obviously your mileage will vary depending on what you're shooting and how close you are, but this should give you a rough idea. So, it would be good to take an image of the cottage that we absolutely have just bought and are not just renting for the week, and will live here forever, honest. Yeah, be a good memory of it, I think. Hopefully this will be wide enough to get it. I'm at 16mm now and it can barely cope, so not sure what the equivalent focal range is of this actually, but see if it's wide enough to get it. Some stats for the cameras here. The Instax Wide has a 95mm f14 lens, which is a 35mm lens in full frame equivalence. Its shutter ranges from 1/64th to 1/200th of a second. You can never see which settings it's choosing though. Similar with the Mini 11, which has a 35mm equivalent lens also, and a maximum aperture of 12.7. Its shutter varies from half a second to 250th of a second, none of which you have any control over with the Mini 11. I will note for myself actually that it does default to 0.9 to 3 meters that it focuses on, as opposed to what it probably should default to is 3 meters to infinity. So you have to change it every time. Obviously that's dependent on who's using it, but I won't be taking selfies with all the friends I don't have anytime soon. I'm referring to the limited controls you have on the side of the 210 wide here. Like I said, you can choose what to focus on within a range of either 0.9 to 3 meters or 3 meters to infinity, and it defaults to the former, which I don't think it should. While we're here, you can also control your flash and tell the camera to brighten the image, darken it, or leave it at its default neutral setting. As you could see there, Helen was keen as mustard to see my small collection of instantly average Instax shots, and from an exposure perspective, we're 3 for 4 now. I didn't think it'd handle the sunlight blasting the bright white wall, but it actually did very well. So it seems as though it's just contrasty shots it struggles with, which is understandable. We almost made it off the driveway and down towards Keswick when I noticed the shot that I'd wanted to get for days had opened up, so I had to jump out and shoot it quickly. There was a parked car outside this awesome looking building the whole time we were there, and as soon as I saw it was gone I took full advantage. I don't think I lined it up perfectly. There's a huge mountain behind which really adds perspective, and whilst I couldn't get it all in the frame, pulling a bit more to the right might have looked better. I'm still getting used to that parallax error here, but I did manage to get the whole tree to the left in frame, so maybe it turned out for the better. As you know, I'm a glass half full kind of guy, and like to be cheery and upbeat at all times. Anyway, after Helen was done messing about, we finally made it to Derwent Water, where I made it over the halfway mark on this cartridge. And again, this is much like the first image where I should have perhaps brightened it to totally blow out the sky and lift some of those shadows. It's worth noting that the photos do have a really shiny plastic film over them, probably so you don't poison yourself with chemicals when you lick a delicious looking shot. This is relevant when it comes to digitizing the images. I did a quick search and the best suggestion I saw outside of a scanner was using an app called PhotoScan by Google, which takes 4 shots of each corner and stitches them together. It's a bit hit and miss, but it works for the most part. Point being that this method will pick up the glare and reflections of the plastic onto the digital copy. I don't really know of a better way to digitize these images, but they're only Instax shots, so I don't really care. You can let me know in the comments if you know of a better method. Helen was a lot more stingy with her shots because she doesn't have the burden of making incredible videos on YouTube, which I don't either, thank God. She did decide to grace us with her Mini 11 prowess though.
then I'll get it in the dark.
I don't actually know if you need to do that or not, but how does it look?
Well, it's getting there. It's not properly done yet, I don't think. I'll put it in my cool Instax book that you got me.
Yep. I do prefer the size of the Instax Wide shots, to be honest, and it has missed a little bit on the exposure here, but you just have to accept the fact that you have hardly any control with these instant cameras, and instead you just enjoy the gimmick of a point and shoot that gives you an immediate printout. Analysing exposure and sharpness all the time will definitely take away from the experience. It's way more fun to just shoot and see what happens, said the mass murdering gunman. In the immortal words of Katy Perry, be like a plastic bag blowing in the wind. I always thought that was a really deep and romantic analogy. One left. This is a decent shot. I think maybe I could have tried to remove the sky in the top right by taking a few steps forward, but that would have removed the tulips in the bottom corner too. The trees have their branches overhanging the path, which looks cool. Helen liked the look of this plant, so we decided to test the minimum focus distance of the Mini 11, which is 30 centimeters or just under 12 inches. The 210 has to be slightly further away at 45 centimeters, which is just under 18 inches. It's difficult to tell here with the digital copy, but I think the shot was taken a little bit too close. They're not exactly the sharpest images anyway, and I'm not sure if that's due to the development method or the lens itself. But with the real printout, there are some tiny flowers in focus in the bottom left. Might want to take a tape measure out with you if you decide to start shooting close-ups. Wait for Maggot Dick to drive past. Yeah, boy races. We've only got one shot left on this roll, so needs to be the most dynamite. Falling over. Needs to be the most dynamite picture anyone's ever seen, and you're probably about to see it within a matter of seconds.
Really, am I?
You won't, because you're going to be in it. I think I've lined it up already.
What, with my doozer t-shirt on?
You're proud of this? Just
looking super cool.
Doozer.
With my rucksack on and my
if you know what a doozer is, you can leave a comment, and don't Google it, liars.
Yeah, everybody should know what a doozer is.
It's really satisfying slowly filling up these Instax folders too. Kinda like making a little portfolio just for you to look at in private. Because why would I ever admit to taking any of these shots? The audio's awful here, but I was just talking through how I think if the image is roughly 50-50 bright sky to foreground, then it tends to try and expose for the sky and makes the ground darker than you'd like, as we've seen in previous images. So I think I've definitely confirmed here that if roughly half the frame is sky, then just use the lighten function on the camera. The dimensions of the wide shots are 62mm by 99mm, and the Instax Mini spits out 62mm by 46mm shots. In old money, that's 3.4 by 4.25 inches, and 3.4 by 2.1 inches. Basically they're the same height, but the wide shots have twice the width. You get 2 cartridges in a pack, each consisting of 10 shots, and it's time for my second roll here, which you load in exactly the same way as the Mini 11. Just line up the yellow dots and fire off the first image to get rid of the protective layer. After making sure to throw my litter all over the floor, we moved on to an ice cream van Helen had spotted and wanted to take a shot of. Alright, let's see it. I think this is one of the best shots of the day. and while I told Helen it was shit out of pure jealousy, it actually turned out really good. The Instax film rendered the colours and exposed perfectly, and while the registration on the van gives the date of manufacture away to those who know, 1901 being written on an image that already has an old school look to it really adds to the composition. Obviously yellow and blue are complementary colours as well. This is one of those shots that looks good with your eyes, but as soon as you look through the viewfinder it's not that interesting. I got Helen to walk through the shot to add at least a little bit of interest here. People always look at her like she's Quasimodo, so there must be something interesting about her. Have you done it?
Yeah, pretty good.
Let's have a look now.
I think it looks alright. I think mine are better than yours, to be honest.
You think yours are better than mine?
Yeah.
Well, it's nice to have dreams, isn't it? Pardon? What did you just say?
That's what I'm used to.
That's what she's used to. After making her admit that I'm only slightly under average size, we went on to play around at Crazy Golf. I thought some of the colours and interesting shapes might look good on Instax. Come on, take it seriously, come on.
Holding the club properly as well, like a pro.
Yeah.
Get a proper stance here. Right.
Oh yes, that's what we like to see. This one will be easy. That's why they call me Adam Black, Crazy Golf Man.
I didn't mind that, it was so cool, was it? Oh, are you joking? Have you seen what he sent it? Yeah,
Just line up as if you're going to take the shot. I hadn't done any close-up shots on the wide camera yet, so set the focus from 0.9 to 3 meters. Looking at that footage, I think I was about a meter away. It seemed to have the focus alright, but it's our old friend exposure not doing quite right again. But it's down to user error at this point because apparently I'm just not learning. You might notice some of the shiny red paint on the floor reflecting a lot of light here as well, which also could have thrown it off if we're fishing for excuses. So, tee off from here, up, the slope, and supposedly down there, but I'm such a good golfer that I managed to get it on the ridge there, which takes incredible skill. Oh, sorry, should I have stuck my club in there? It was embarrassing for her at this point, so I gave her a few pointers and she went on to win the course by 1 hole, which was infuriating, and it was all I could do to not bludgeon her to death with that cheap rented golf club. The fact that there would have been a small fine for a broken club of £5 played no small part in her survival either. My last shot was with these tulips, and I decided to try getting in closer again to see if there was any bokeh whatsoever. It was always a long shot with a wide lens, and I didn't know that it was an aperture of f14 at the time, so there's little to no chance of any blurry backgrounds with this camera. I could have tried getting in even closer I suppose, but I doubt it'll make any difference. It's also worth noting with the Mini 11 that you have absolutely no control over what the camera does, including whether or not the flash fires. So even though this shot was taken in broad daylight, the flash fired and ruined this picture of the bronze dog who's famous or something. Obviously with it being metal, the light bounced straight off it and overexposed the subject, an issue that could be avoided if the flash could be turned off. Anyway, for all their flaws, I think that's part of what makes Instax so much fun to shoot. You don't know exactly what you're going to get, but it's always exciting to see the photo appear from the camera. It is if you're a simpleton like me, anyway.